Okay.
Okay.
All right, well, I will officially call the meeting to order for the regular meeting of the Village Board of Trustees on January 20th, 2022. And we'll start with announcements. I had one announcement before we got to the check over $25,000, which I just wanted to give a special shout out to our DPW staff and that have done such an unbelievable job with keeping our roads clear. We haven't had the worst winter yet, knock on wood. But, you know, I've already gotten half a dozen at least positive emails thanking the DPW staff for, you know, keeping our roads just much better than anyone else. Like, I think that's the recurring theme is I knew I got to Irvington when I crossed over and the pavement was clear and I was able to drive. So just wanted to thank them all for their hard work. I know those are long nights and long days of plowing and salting. And you know, the difference between a giant storm and a small storm isn't that great for them. They have to be out and cover the same amount of roadway. So I just wanted to give them a little, you know, recognition at the beginning of the call. Next up is a check over $25,000 per the village policy. This was for Contech Construction Technology, which was for curb repair in West Sunnyside Lane due to Ida storm damage. From the general fund and hopefully a FEMA submission or a FEMA reimbursement. It's a submission at this point. That was for $93,461.79. Next up is correspondence. We had one piece of correspondence from Nina Caparel Dawson at the December 20th village board meeting. There outside of town hall was designated the Madam C.J. Barker Plaza. While I'm pleased to see we're honoring important historic people who have lived here, I also believe we should pay tribute to local residents who have a direct impact on our village. At this board meeting, I spoke about the many contributions of Wilfred Lockwood and Adele Warnock, two individuals who deserve such an honor. I propose that a plaque be placed in the area on the east side of North Ferris Street between the fountain and the entrance to the Irvington Police Department, naming it Wilfred Lockwood Adele Warnock Corner. This would be an appropriate way to honor their dedication to public service, which has influenced the lives of generations of Irvington residents. Sincerely, Nina Caparel Dawson. Thank you for the letter, Nina. We'll consider it as a board, and you know, I think that there's, you know, probably a lot of other people who can be honored in the village, and we're happy to, you know, look into all of them. That was it for correspondence, so I will open it up to public comment. If anyone would like to speak now. Otherwise, I will move on to the consent agenda. I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments on the consent agenda. Otherwise, I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right, carries. Next up is a Recreation and Parks Department update. I believe we have the esteemed Joseph Archino. And I'm not sure who, I see a couple RPAC members as well. I'm not sure if Joe would like them to join.
Yeah. Anyone else on the panel?
See Michael
I'm
Smith
here.
and hey Joe,
Hi, everybody.
how are you?
I'm good. How's everyone? Let me just,
Doing well.
I didn't expect to go on this soon. I was laying down, which none of you can do right now. It's good to see everyone.
Good to see you as well. Did you want anyone from either of the, like there's a couple RPAC members on. Did you want anyone to join you, or you're just going to lead off?
Again, if they want to raise their hand, it's up to you guys. I mean, you know, I let them know I was going to be on, and I'm not surprised that some of them have showed up. They're always there to support us. So it's up to Larry and you guys. I mean, I'll be handling the presentation, and then if you have questions, of course, they can jump in too. But.
Sure. So why don't we start the presentation? If they have something to say, they can just raise their hand, and we'll let them join.
Well, the first thing I'd like to do before we get into the actual discussion on the department is just talk about a high school graduation and the Juneteenth event. I've taken a couple of steps just to try to make sure with Larry's support that we have as great a day as we possibly can for the community. So I spoke to Sarah Cox, who is representing the Juneteenth event, and I spoke to Dr. Harrison Juliet, the principal from the high school, and Chief Pignatelli. And so the way we've tried to set the weekend up and the Saturday up on that weekend is that the high school graduation will take place in either Matheson or Scenic Hudson. We've not decided that yet. And we'll move the graduation up to the earlier start time, which is 10 a.m. We'll give the families and the graduates until, 1:30 in the park. And then we've asked that the activity at the Main Street School not start until 2. And then that event and I believe the commemoration of the statue will also happen that day, if I'm not mistaken. They'll have from 2:00 on. Sarah thought that would work great. The school's thrilled. So I think, again, it could be another day. It was exactly what we did last year on the Saturday. Both events had their slots and it worked well. And there'll be a parade in the morning again from the high school down to the parks. So I just wanted to make sure that we could give a formal approval to the high school graduation. I'm sure you've already taken care of the Juneteenth event. But normally we approve it at a board meeting and then I let them know that.
Sure. I mean, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone speak up, but we're always happy to, let our parks be used for the graduation. It's a great tradition and a special day for everyone involved.
I also think that parade, the last year was the first time I experienced that parade, and I almost want to graduate from Irvington High School so I could do that. I might just leave my car in there.
That was a lot of fun, and Mike Toolin of the police department has led the parade the past few years, so we'll miss him this year at the parade. But you're right, the parade turned out, it was something I was always very nervous about because that's what I do. I get nervous, but it really was such a nice thing. Just standing there watching all the kids go by. So we'll try to repeat it again this year. Okay, so I've sent you, when Larry and I were discussing the board's desire to have additional conversations with the department heads, which as Dr. Lonke will tell you, is something I've hoped we would do. And I'm thrilled that you're moving forward with that. I'm never afraid to say a few words, as you all know. I thought it would be a great opportunity, especially since we have 2 new trustees who I really haven't had a chance to work with yet, to try to give them a little bit of background. And I pulled together some of the old presentations, some of the info from presentations, updated a lot, sent it out to you guys last week so that you'd have a chance to look it over, because it'd be impossible to try to absorb everything that I might say tonight. I thought you might pick up on things that were important to you, and then we can discuss them. And again, if during my talk you want to jump in and ask a question, everyone, please feel free to do so. I do want to start off by just saying how proud I am of our department. I think we have been a critical a critical part of what the village has had to go through to get through COVID. I know we stepped up that very first week and started with the senior home deliveries, and we were going full out every day. We have enough supplies put away just in case something happens, because we always want to be ready. We had the fiberglass up in places before most people were even thinking about that. And, with the support of Larry and Brenda and the DPW, my guys, everyone, we just got in a position where we were ready to move forward and to do things. So, it's been a rough stretch for all of us. The staff has all put in a lot of extra time. And right now, today, and I know Brenda is probably happy about our numbers compared to where they were last year. We've made a huge comeback. We now have gone virtual. If there's anything good that came out of COVID, and I have a real hard time finding anything good to say about it, it's that it forced our department to go online for registration. I've always been a dinosaur and felt people should come in and get to know us and register in person. And I know I stood alone on that. But with COVID, we needed to go, we needed to become a more accessible, available place for our residents to get information, to join programs, to sign up. And we did that. And it was not easy. It was a very difficult transition for us to take everything that we had and make it go online, starting with the tennis court permits, which was how we all learned about this. The tennis courts were the very first program we brought back, and we did it with online registration. So we all got a little bit of a lesson there. And then we just started one by one, putting all of our programs back there. Through the end of December, our revenue is over $420,000, and that's more than we brought in for the entire 12 months last year. So, and that's because so many programs are running. Now, not everything is back. Many things have been changed or replaced or modified, but we've got a lot of different programs going on. You all received a hard copy of our brochure, which is really the best thing for you to keep by your desk if a resident calls to ask questions about the department. The report I sent you is kind of a summary of the brochure almost, but it gives you an opportunity to see how widespread we are, how many different departments we interact with. And, the goal is, starting with the next fiscal, that everything will be back, all programs. Larry and I have already discussed, and I've shared with the staff that we're not looking to put any limits on our day camp numbers this year like we did last year. We're looking to go full with our Teenscape program this summer. So those are, very exciting things to just to say those two things, because, I'm sorry, my computer's just asking me a question I got to get out of. Last year, picking the right number to put on day camp was very hard. We had no idea what response we would get from the community. We weren't sure parents really were ready to send their kids to camp. The Teenscape was even more difficult because right up until the week before Teenscape started, we were fighting to get certain locations approved by the health department. And with the help of the county executive's office, we were able to convince the health department that most of what we wanted to do were safe, and the steps we took to make it safe allowed us to run it. So we're looking forward to great things in the summer and to be able to run our programs. Day camp will be returning to Dow's Lane School. Last year, for I think the fourth time in the past 10 years, we were at the Main Street School. We honestly love it. We love it there. It's just a great building to be in. And not that Dow's Lane isn't, but there's just things about Main Street that's better for day camp. But we're going back to Dow's Lane this summer. Teenscape's kind of up in the air because, as you probably know, there's enormous construction scheduled for this summer for the school district buildings. We may not even have a gym for the O'Hara League this summer. So we're prepared. We're going forward. And that's a general thing. So just to go over a few things, I would like to talk about each building a little. The Benjamin Center had some really bad damage during the storm. And we're working with the insurance company right now. My office floor got flooded. For those of you who've been in my office, you may not have realized that there was damage, but there was. Maureen's office took on some damage. And we will be starting the work during the school break in February, because it's quiet for us that week, and it's a good week to rip things apart and try to get the office back together. We are using the upstairs at the Benjamin Center for programs. We have cooking classes there. Some of our ballet classes are there, and we'll be bringing some additional ones there. The senior center is open 4 days a week from 7 to 8 a.m. until about 2 or 3, depending on what day of the week. We're taking seniors food shopping every Wednesday. We've restored some of their programs. Mahjong is a big thing right now. I don't even know if I said it right, but it's something they really like. They're doing their exercise classes and bridge. The knitting club is back together. What they missed the most, and we have not been able to give them back yet, is our famous senior luncheons. It's one of the things they look forward to the most, but feeding 60 to 90 people in a room where masks have to be off is just something we're not comfortable with yet. So we hope we can get back there someday soon. But, right now when they have coffee, they sit in the back room, 4 people to a table. All of the snacks are prepackaged so that no one has to grab something from an open tray. So, lots of thought have to go into things like that. But the building is functioning. We do have trouble with the heating system. We're working on a capital project, which the original prices came back was way higher than we thought. And Larry and Ed Marin are doing all they can to find a way to reduce costs so that we can get the heating and the air conditioning system there fixed once and for all. Right now, Chris DePaoli spends an hour in that building every day. We cannot figure out why it's going on and shutting off at different times. We've had Robeson out more times than I can count. The system needs to be changed, and hopefully we'll get there soon. The O'Hara Nature Center was the first building that came back online for us with COVID, and where we started running programs outside. We're using the inside quite a bit now. There's a number of programs going on up there. It's the home of the Irvington Girl Scouts now. They're there every Friday afternoon and several other days in the week. We've developed a wonderful relationship with the Girl Scouts, and it's going to continue to grow. In addition to the Girl Scouts, a new Eagle Scout project will be starting soon, continuing some work along the marshland that was started with the previous Eagle Scouts project. We've got volunteers who have come together twice a month to go into the woods and cut vines and dig up barberry bushes. And that's all done through the Nature Center set up with CJ and his helpers. So our buildings are doing well. They take a beating. I always go back to when I think of our buildings, former Irvington trustee, and one of the very first people I worked for by the name of Bob Pouch. Many of you probably know and have heard of Bob. I remember one night at a work session when we used to all go upstairs, department heads and the board, and we were talking, and Bob just looked at us and says, "What's wrong with us? Why do we take care of everything else and leave our buildings to fall apart?" And it was like a call to a battle for all of us to pay more attention. And I know it changed the way I thought about it. And we take as good care of our building as I think we can. We check every building every single day of the year. 365 days a year, someone checks the Nature Center, the Rec Center, and the O'Hara Nature Center. So, because you don't want to come in with frozen pipes and things like that. And because of the age of the Benjamin and the Senior Center, checking them is extremely important thing to do. Our parks right now, the Irvington Woods Park, as I've talked about, has a lot going on. We've got the DEC tree identification program going on. And last night, the Woods Committee had a great presentation by Miguel Barrios, who is doing the report for us. The work that's going to come out in the report will be so impressive to all of you, and things that we're learning as we go, and what's wrong with the woods, how to make it better. Many of you may have seen today that we kicked off a survey of the community, trying to find out what the community feels about the deer situation. We've made a couple of subgroups. I think I've mentioned to you in past meetings. One subgroup is studying the deer situation in the community. The other is to develop a new, more user-friendly trails map that will come out in the spring, so that it's easier to maneuver with all of the things that have been added in the woods. And the third is the DEC grant. We've identified hazardous trees. We've already taken down 13 of the ones that were identified with our own staff, which the DEC and Miguel could not believe we were able to act on that quickly. That's a credit to the staff for jumping on that. As you can assume, when there's snow in the woods, it's a difficult time, but we're still doing things out there. Matheson Park right now, although people still on good days fill the playground, when Matheson decides winter's here, it's tough to fight it. It gets very cold and very windy down there, but the park is doing well. We try to keep an eye on it at all times. We're working on what the park will be and look like in the spring. We'll be coming to you budget time with some improvements we're looking to make on the north end of the park. One of the things that came out in our interviews with our park attendants was the most highly requested thing they got from people was there needs to be more for adults to do. So we're looking at putting in horseshoe pits, permanent cornhole games, volleyball net that can be portable, and a few other things, because we'd like to be able to make sure that adults can stay in the park as long as possible. There'll be some other things coming out at budget time also. Scenic Hudson, if you've been down there, the high grasses have already been cut. We have to do that every year. The park's in good shape. It still gets many, many walkers. I know the mayor, rightfully so, was giving credit to the DPW for the amazing job they do during snow. One of the things you should know is if we're late getting the pathways plowed at Scenic Hudson Park, my phone starts ringing very quickly. People love to walk down there when it snows. And as long as we can get on the pathways and it's a safe condition, Chris and his crew are out there clearing the pathways so that residents are able to walk them. And it's amazing how many people still go down there. The tennis courts are semi-opened right now. If it's a good day, we'll open the gates up. We're not taking reservations. We're not playing at night. We've had to loosen the nets because you need to take the tension off of them during the winter. But the most important thing that's happened at Memorial, and again, I want to thank Dr. Lonke and Larry for their help. As you know, there were a few residents who were upset that we had to lock the Station Road entrance to Memorial Park because of the damage from the storm, and we had a lot of sinkholes develop on the ground between the brook and the Station Road fence area. So we had to close that up. Many residents wanted it back open because they really liked being able to cut through to Upper Park to get to Dow's Lane. We were afraid it was still unsafe. We met there, we looked at some things, and within a week we were able to have a new fence put up. The playground is not open, and one of the reasons we can't open the playground is the pipe that has developed some sinkholes goes directly underneath the playground. So until we can make sure that that pipe gets filled or replaced, whatever's going to happen, it's just not safe to use the playground. But residents can enter Station Road Park, head towards Broadway, use the hill for sleigh riding, which is a hill many Irvington residents learned to sleigh ride on. I bet the mayor did some sleigh riding on that hill at one time. And now they can go up to the bridge, cross over, and get to the upper part of the park. So that, happened very quickly and without much fanfare. And with Dr. Lonke's help, he shared what was going on with the homeowners association. I don't know what they call themselves, but they were very, very happy that we were able to do that for them. Halsey Pond right now, as you know, you have some construction going on the home to the left. I think it's either the Devon or Devlin's house. So there's we have to keep an eye on the construction. Ed Marin's great with that, but the pond is okay. It's just not a place when it gets muddy or wet. We got to make sure we keep vehicles out of there because the damage to the road is not a good thing. Hastings Park, which some of you may not even know exists, which is on Harriman Road, which is a small triangle piece of land, which really isn't usable for much, but enjoying nature, has kind of been adopted by John Siegel and his family, and they've been helping take care of that for a number of years. In fact, if they haven't, they'll be going in there as soon as they can to do some cutting, and they take out everything they take down. So we're grateful to the help we get from them. And then finally, as far as outdoor facilities go, we completed another successful year at Columbia University with our garden program. Getting back in there was very difficult. Columbia had a lot of hesitation about letting us back in there. Hi, buddy. My dog just came to say hello. Hello. But we did let us back in, and we had 32 gardens, of which I think 28 were used this year. So it was, I know that was appreciated by everyone when we got back there. And the relationship with the grounds people at Columbia is really the reason they let us back there. We've been responsive to everything they've asked for. Moving on, I've already talked about the online program registration. I would like to compliment the entire staff, but in particular, Mike DiNardo, who really took the lead with this and followed Larry's direction, identified the place to go, and has really been the one that monitors it for us. He's the one who generated the revenue report that was at the end of your package. For those of you who don't know, or for our new trustees in particular, the group that of volunteers that is the most critical to all of our work is the Recreation and Park Advisory Committee, which is chaired by Rick Rizzullo. We have 8 other members. They help oversee making sure our fees are in line. They try to make sure that we're doing what the public says. They represent a lot of different parts of the community in different age groups, and we communicate through emails all the time. Our meetings have been virtual for quite some time now. We'll likely be meeting again next week, but they're just a tremendous support system for the entire staff. So they can never be taken too lightly as to what they do for our board members, for Brian, Larry, and Mark. You've the last several years seen how many times when there was an issue and I had to be in front of you, how many of them were there to show support and to try to help with whatever they could. The second committee, which is become critical, is the Irvington Woods Committee, which is chaired by Nikki Coddington. They oversee everything that makes up the Irvington Woods Park, which is the O'Hara Nature Center, the Peter Rowley Trailway System, and the reservoir in the area around the reservoir. They meet at least monthly. As I've mentioned, there are now subcommittees for the group. They oversee just about everything that we do up there. CJ Riley, our new educational director and groundskeeper for the Irvington Woods Park, has taken away some of my responsibilities. So last night was actually the first meeting. He developed the agenda and he basically ran the meeting. And I cannot tell you how much of a help that is to me with all the other things we have going on. For the new trustees, any day you'd like to meet at the Nature Center, meet CJ, see the grounds, we would be more than happy to host you up there any day you want to go. Give me a half an hour notice and I'll have somebody meet you up there if it can't be me. So please keep that in mind. The next group, which is taken on such an important role, and I will spend a little time on, is the Community Advisory Board. I am the oldest sitting member of the Community Advisory Board. It has been around for over 30 years. It used to be known as the Irvington Drug Committee. It's evolved over the years. I am co-chairing it right now with Chris Raymond, who has stepped in and done a great job. We work with our grant coordinator, Lisa Tomine. And in addition to the Community Advisory Board, we oversee the federal grant that we are now in. Is it our 7th year or 8th year, Larry? 7th?
Yeah, I think we're
Yeah.
in 7.
Yeah, we get $125,000 a year from the federal government through the Student Assistance Services Program to try to do things that help with drug and alcohol abuse problems facing our teens. And as I'm sure what I'm going to say is going to be no surprise to any of you, is COVID has had an enormous impact on the mental health of everyone, but in particular, the young people in the community. And we meet once a month, the Community Advisory Board. Some meetings, there's between 50 and 60 people. There could be as many as 40 students sitting in. Larry and Brian have been at recent meetings, so they can tell you about it. The meetings now, the agenda is developed by a student committee that we've created. They meet with Chris Raymond and Lisa and decide what agenda items they want. Most meetings, we do breakout sessions where we'll talk about things that are important to the kids that, again, that they've come up with, like, you know, where do you feel the most pressure right now? How is being on the screen when we were on all virtual? You know, there was lots of talk of burnout and frustration. So we're always trying to find ways. We help sponsor events at the high school, like the De-Stress Fest, which we are spending extra money on to try to help them to find ways to give the students releases. You know, there's a big role that the community has to play helping with the health of our kids in our community. The CAB is front and center with that, and they play an extremely important role. The partnership with the school district, the key members of the committee include the superintendent, Dr. Harrison, high school principal, middle school principal, school psychologists. There's so many people involved, the police chief, other members of the police department, members of my staff, parents organizations, the IEF, the PTSA. It's just an enormous gathering of people all there just to try to help our students feel they have a voice. And I'd put up the CAB in Irvington against any community group in Westchester right now. So, you know, the grant, we have money to spend. We give the school and we give groups chances to come in and tell us what they want to do. And if we can fit it in to what's allowed in the funding of the grant, then we go ahead and we fund it. The village is in charge of the funds, and we have a specific account just for it. And like I said, $125,000 a year. It ends after its 10th year. So, you know, I remember year one, we were laughing, saying 10 years. Who's going to care about 10 years? Well, we're closer to that than we are to the first year right now. So, but again, you're always welcome to join any of those meetings. It's, in addition to the CAB, there's a group known as the IASC board. That's the executive committee that reviews all the financial requests that come in. That's made up, again, of a lot of the same people I mentioned, plus some other residents. And what will happen is, for example, the school principal wants to ask for extra funding for the prom, and she gives us a budget of what that would be, and then the committee will overlook it and they'll decide, gee, do we think that's important enough to spend? And we make a decision, and then Lisa Tomine, the grant coordinator, she handles everything that goes with it. A group that no one really talks about much is the Irvington Beautification Committee. Also been around for over 30 years. They do the greening of the village. They plant in the spring, they plant in the summer. They do the flower boxes up and down Main Street. They do the board at the top of the hill. They've helped with Village Hall, the War Monument. It's all volunteers. The chairs of that group are Rita Milo and Ann Myers. They've gotten some new members the past year. We saw a lot of them with the greening of the village for the holidays. Unsung group, you know, they do a lot for very little amount of money. All they ask is when they put their day's work in that I have lunch ready for them at 12 o'clock. So But that's an easy thing for me, as you know. So your beautification committee plays a big role for you also. Some other things just so that you're aware and you, when you see how much money we spend, you can think how much is involved. The department also plays critical roles on the Memorial Day ceremony, Veterans Day, the 9/11 ceremony, the village tree lighting, the greening of the village, all Main Street plantings, maintenance of the war memorials, the signage at the top of the hill. I have the wonderful title of being the one who approves whether a sign is worthy or not of going up. And I'm sure you can imagine how many enemies I've made over the years to having that job. We're responsible for high school graduation in the park, the French monument at the entrance to the village, the two I'm most proud of, the Thanksgiving Day home delivery program, the holiday basket program, whatever we end up doing for July 4th. We've played an integral role with the FACE committee. We now are involved with the Theater Environmental Festival. We have a partnership with Greg Allen and the theater, and we also assist with the high school midnight run program. I could probably give you another 10 or 15, but I think you get the point. I also, because I wanted you to have a chance to see it, I gave you, it's not going to win an award, but I tried to give you a little bit of an organizational chart, so you'd have an idea of who falls where and who's responsible. It's not perfect, but again, I think it gets the message across, kind of showing you where, different people. Most of the staff that you see below where the executive, underneath the assistant superintendent of recreation and parks, again, who is Maureen DePauli, though the next 3 or 4 lines are just different people. I put their titles instead of their positions, their title instead of their names. Their names are at the very front of that. And then the last thing that it says on that page, which can never be taken lightly, is the number of volunteers that we depend on and use, whether it be for the nature center or other areas of the park. The next couple pages are really for you. Who does what? I mean, hey, Joe, I want to talk, who runs your toddler programs? And you'd be able to see that, Maureen DePauli is the person you reach out to there. All of that information on the next few pages for who runs what programs is in the brochure, so that when a resident's online looking, if they have questions and they want to know who they should talk to about the kayak racks, the community gardens, I'm interested in Lego programs, you now have an idea of which staff does what. I also thought that was an important thing for you to see when you're looking at the list of people who work for us. The following page, which we stole right from the brochure, is just all the different ways. I could remember my first brochure, there was none of this. There was none of these ways to connect people other than our telephone number. And now you can see the various ways and all the different things that we're connected to. We know this page comes in very handy for village residents so that they know where to look and get information. And then what we did at the end is just to give you an idea of really how impactful the online registration has been, is that here you're able to see starting in June of this fiscal year, the amount of money that has been taken in through the online registration. There's also money that was collected prior to June 1st, which was deferred revenue that Brenda carries over and puts in. And then there's still some direct revenue reports that we make, whether someone drops off a check at the office or makes a donation. We'll then do a direct revenue report, send it up to Monica at Brenda's office, and it gets entered. And that's all part of this. Our goal is going to be over $600,000 by the end of the year. That will be less than, I believe, the 700 would have been in a perfect world, but there'll be a reduction in expenses that will correlate with that. So I think in a strange way, by the end of the year, the revenue is going to look very healthy for our department. So I know it's a lot. I know I talked a lot, rambled a lot. I think I hit a lot of the key things. I'm open to any questions or concerns that any of you may have.
Well, Joe, I think you said it, you could mention another 10 things at one point. I think for almost any part of your presentation, we could probably talk for an hour or more. A couple things I just want to highlight. When I was looking at the staff, well, first, Maureen DePauli was my first boss ever when I worked at the day camp. And I think that kind of speaks to how long everyone's been there, and that says a lot about an organization when you have, the continuity of staff like that. I mean, obviously Maureen, but Angela, Laura, Chris DePauli, Scott Brennan, they've all been there forever. And then you kind of, and Joan Armstrong, then you add kind of all-stars like Mike DiNardo and CJ Riley. And I think you see why it's such a great department. And that's not even mentioning all the volunteers, not to mention RPAC, not to mention the Woods Committee, not to mention Beauty. Like there's just so many people that just love the rec department so much that they all work to make it such a great department that then allows Irvington to have those, feel good Irvington moments, whether to me, it's, the backbone or kind of Veterans Day, 9/11 and Memorial Day, which, you and I spoke this week. We had talked about expanding Memorial Day, 2 years ago. I guess we're going to try to do it for 2020. We talked about it in 2019, but I was also talking to Larry about it today. We're going to reach out. We have two people who are willing to co-chair the expand Memorial Day ceremony. So Larry's going to reach out either tomorrow or Monday to them to ensure that they're still willing to do that. But we're going to try to reinvigorate, kind of Memorial Day, get some more turnout, reach out to some local people. But that's just one kind of example of like the special days that make Irvington, and it kind of keeps the tradition of Irvington as well as the change of Irvington. Things like Rocktoberfest, another great day. You and I we just nailed down a date. September 24th, the last Saturday in September. I think those things are important. It's part of Irvington's identity, and along with the schools and being a bulldog, being Irvington Rec is a big part of being a bulldog as well. But I think another thing that you spoke about that hit home with me was the way the CAB has really evolved. Even in the 10 years that I've been involved with it, it was before it was 40 people and it was 30 adults and 10 students who didn't speak up. We flipped that narrative on its head under recent leadership, and it's continued with you and Chris. But now it's really a place where we listen to the students. We bring kind of the most important adult leaders in the community, whether it's clergy or the police or the judges or the mayor or all the department heads come and they get to hear from the students directly what's important to them. And the schools as well. I think it's important to know that the principals are on it, middle school, high school principal, the superintendent of schools. It's really a who's who of kind of the leadership of the community that really gets to hear from the students. And the amazing thing is the students are so frank. They speak completely honestly, even in small groups. And it's been an unbelievable experience when I've been involved in that. I think COVID reminded us of how much the seniors rely on the rec department. Some seniors rely on them as almost their primary caregivers, or at least the people that ensure that they're okay. If they don't have family nearby, it's kind of like a pseudo family, and it gives them a great place to go where they can have some fun and get out of their homes and see other people and have some great activities. And I think the last group that I really want to highlight are all the people that are helped by the rec that no one ever knows about. It's either through the grapevine, through the schools. There's just, there's dozens of people I'm aware of that are helped, whether it's, there's someone who's, kind of making ends meet and then their washing machine dies. And, you'll organize, getting some donations and getting them a washing machine and organize that for them. They don't know where to go. Things like that, where, I think the obvious ones are the Christmas and Thanksgiving baskets, or the holiday baskets and the Thanksgiving baskets. But there's so much that goes on all year helping people, whether it's seniors or, young families or whatever it is that, it's just not publicized because it's not the right thing to do. We do it because it's the right thing to do. And you do that and you don't look for publicity, and you just try to do the right things. And to me, the whole thing that kind of brings us all back together, Joe, is you. I know you always love to give credit away, but to keep a staff together for 30 years, for 25 years, it takes a leader that listens, that leads, that inspires, and that just has a big heart, and I think that's probably, that describes you to a T. And so I think sometimes you might care too much, but that's to the benefit of the village, maybe not to the benefit of your health, but thank you for all that you've done for all these years and continue to do, and continue to evolve what you do. I think it'd be much easier for you to just say, I've done it for this way for 30 plus years, and that's the way I'm going to do it. But you really are open to listening to other people's opinions, and just think getting online is not an easy thing to do for, especially for reservations. And we've done it this way. It ain't broke, don't fix it. But you can tell by the success of the online piece, how important that is. And getting the right people like the Mike Donardos to help you with it is great. And asking for help and then finding good quality people is, hats off to you, Joe, and thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate those words. I think the one thing that we kind of feel is there's always a way to help. Always, it may not be the perfect way, the best way, but there's always a way, and there's always someone a phone call away in this community who will come through for us. I know they probably cringe when they see my number pop up, but there are so many great people in this community who jump forward to help, and it's led by RPAC. And Brian, you're right. I think of all the years, when I look back, I think the thing I'm most proud of is the staff and the relationship and the length of time we've been together. If you really think about it, the only two full-time people who've left us in the past 25 plus years, the two of them are still probably two of my closest friends in the world. And that's Matt Arone, who's the superintendent in Rec in Sleepy Hollow, and Ray Cavallo, who really is the one who put Teenscape on the map. So the rest of us have been getting old together, and the young kids, the young staff help, but we're an extended family. So I know I make Larry and Brenda nervous a lot, but they're always watching, and we're grateful for the support we've always gotten from everybody. So thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Any other questions? All right. Well, Joe, thanks very much. We appreciate it, and keep up the good work.
I can't see which RPAC family's on there, but I want to thank you for all listening to me once again tonight. So thank you.
All right. Next up, keeping in the rec spirit, is a volunteer appointment of the Irvington Woods Committee. Scroll here. Resolve to appoint Dan Broadhead as a member of the Irvington Woods Committee with the term to expire December of 2022. I'll make the motion if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Next is renewal of an intermunicipal agreement for the Greenberg Drug and Alcohol Task Force. Laurie, how many years have we been involved in this now? It's been.
So this started in 2004.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a long time. So I don't know if you want me to outline the task force. The chief was kind enough to put together a little bit of a summary. But it's up to you how deep you want to get into it. This is a renewal agreement, obviously, for something that we've been in for many years.
Maybe, I don't know if I assume everyone's pretty familiar with it. I don't know if there's any questions, but especially because of your audio issues, we don't need to make you do the whole summary if everyone's familiar with it. But I think people are fairly familiar with it. Doesn't look like there's a lot of questions, so I will go ahead and read the resolution. Resolve to approve the renewal of the intermunicipal agreement between the towns of Greenberg and North Castle and the villages of Ardsley, Dobbs Ferry, Elmsford, Hastings on Hudson, Irvington, Tarrytown, and Sleepy Hollow to form a task force aimed at drug and alcohol enforcement effective November 1st, 2021 for a 5-year term to authorize the village administrator to execute said agreement. I'll make the motion if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Next up, we have a budget workshop overview, also known as Brenda giving us an early report card.
Okay. Well, we've been working on this since before the holidays, and once the new year came, it's been pretty much nonstop getting data collected and analyzing it. We're still receiving some information, but a lot of it is available, and that's what we're presenting tonight. An overview of where we are financially going into the new 22-23 budget. And it gives a context to the framework of the budget so that when you hear the individual departmental requests, you're able to see how it fits in to where we are right now financially. So the departments are working on their budgets. They'll be submitting them shortly. And we have a schedule coming up for those workshops where you'll be able to see each department's requests and make a determination how it fits in. Tonight, we're going to start in by, I think, looking at the big picture as far as the different components that make up the budget and how we arrive at the ultimate end of it, which is the tax rate. What we're going to present really, I mean, some of the things are determined like, the assessed value, but there's a lot of managerial decisions to be made during this entire process. So nothing is, etched in stone until it gets adopted by the budget, but it's a framework and some things are in here for illustrative purposes at this time. So this is what our tax rate summary sheet looks like. And we have the column on the far right, which is a 22-23 budget. And feel free for anyone to, step in and ask questions. If you, have any questions along the way, I'm happy to answer them. But you can see here, I'm going to go through the different components, how we arrive at everything on this page. So the first line is total expenditures. Those are the appropriations that would be in the general fund budget. It's offset by the revenues. Everything in that column is expressed in thousands. So it's not 19,000, it's 19,207,000 is our expenditures. It's offset by then our revenues. That does not include the tax levy. It would be departmental revenue, sales tax, mortgage tax, things derived from those revenue streams. Then we do appropriate fund balance from the previous year. What I did for this purpose of this was I went to the pre-pandemic levels that we were customarily using, which was 175,000. You can, we can choose a number lower if you'd like to use less or more, but I'm using this to try to get back to where we were before the last 2 years of pandemic that we experienced. Then once you have your expenditures, less the revenue, less the appropriated fund balance, you derive how much you need to levy the taxes. That's for the difference, comes from tax revenue. What happens then, that gets divided amongst the assessed valuation of the village. So it gets divvied up amongst the various parcels in the village, and it comes up with a tax rate. Or comes out, you against the assessed value, comes up with a tax rate. That tax rate is then applied against each individual property owner's assessment. So I've worked on budgets many years, well over 20 of them. And I have to say, everyone is a little unique. I've never entered the budget approach at this point with potentially, at this point, a decrease in a tax rate. Usually we start off with requests and different challenges, and we have a high tax rate, and we have to whittle that down during the process. But we're starting off this year in a unique situation where at this point in time, you could potentially, it's a pretty good range to come in with a flat budget, minimal increase, or even potentially a negative, a decrease in tax rate. So what we're looking at here before we move on and look at each one closer is you can see the assessed valuation is actually up over last year. The the town of Greenberg had not a complete reassessment, but it was a reassessing year. And right now it's about 1.5% increase over last year. What that actually means is, what does that mean? That means you could, given the existing tax rate, you could increase taxes by about 225,000 and still come in with a level tax rate. So it's much better to have a higher one than a lower assessed value, which would necessitate a tax increase right out of the gate. So that's a good thing. And I think we can move on and look at some of the other items a little closer. But I first wanted to start off here with the different moving parts that come up that we're working with.
Can you see that?
It looks good, Larry.
Yep. You can see it.
Okay.
Looks great. So on the expenditure or appropriation side, there are some costs that we already have identified. Our audit fees will be going up. They have not increased in over 5 years. We'll be bidding out a new contract for those services. But based on the fee, we were out of contract actually last year, but with the pandemic, it was too difficult to start bidding it. And they just gave us an increase and we said, that's fine for the 1 year. We did everything remotely. Would have been difficult to take on a new auditing service at that time. So based on what we know, I would anticipate an increase of about 7,000 over the previous costs. Our general liability insurance, they're proposing a 6.5% increase. It has to do with inflation rates and the cost of reinsurance and that whole sector. So what I've taken is 6.5% over last year's premium. So it's relatively a modest increase, but it's an increase there. What's in this current budget now are the salary increases for our unions that are contractual. So we know the CSEA rate is 2.5%. We also have a recently settled police contract. That's a 2.5% increase for next year. That's in this budget. There was also some changes in the uniform allowance and the education allowance. Those items are in here. So anything that would be impacted by those contracts is reflected here. And the current salary of non-union staff is in here. We do provide an opportunity for funding of an increase to the non-union staff in the budget. That's in contingency. So if the board decides later during this process to give an increase there, the funding is available. But it's not reflected in any of the departmental lines. We've had a very large increase in our healthcare costs. I had mentioned, I think during our review of last year's financials, how we hadn't received much of an increase in the past 2 years. They certainly made up for it January 1. The bulk of our costs are in family plans, and those plans have gone up over 12% as of January 1st. So what we do in the budget is we provide the cost, which we know for next year's budget from June to January at that cost. And then we need to provide a buffer for next January 23 to May. We don't know what that increase is. Right now, there's a budget cushion of 8% for 2023. We also have a number of additional policies due to retirements and also new staffing positions that have been added to the village. We have a new assistant building inspector. We have a new parking enforcement officer, groundskeeper at the O'Hara Nature Center. So those positions, new police officers that were recently hired, those are all reflected in here, as well as an addition in case anything would come up unforeseen. So that in total is an over $200,000 increase to the general fund. when there are increases in contractual salaries, we also need to do a calculation of what the Social Security taxes would be on that. And also there's an MTA tax. So that would add to our budget about $23,000. That's if every line were expended, just about every overtime line, every salary line for part-time and full-time staff. In our contingency, we recognize we have a placeholder here for utilities. We receive our electric from New York Power Authority. We had a meeting this past fall. They needed to give us a heads up on a very dramatic increase in rates effective January 1st. Our cost in rates is going up 25% on the usage and about 6% on the demand. There are two components in electric bills, the usage and the demand. So we're waiting really to see an actual bill. It's based on, as of January 1, the amount of usage. So in February, I'll see a new bill to see just how much it's impacted. But they really wanted us to have a heads up for budgeting purposes to allow for that significant increase. Natural gas is way up. The budgets we have allotted for that right now in the current year's budget, that's pretty much expended, and we're only in January. We haven't even received the December bills yet. So we know there are increases in natural gas and also, of course, heating, fuel, and diesel and gasoline. So what we're doing right now is we're putting just a placeholder of 100,000 until we can further evaluate the impact of the increase in all utilities. That'll be a separate analysis. We've also recognized that inflation is taking hold. And what we've done is we provided a placeholder of another 100,000. It's based on those line items in the budget that would be subjective to or subject to inflationary cost increases. So as we receive maybe more information from DPW or other departments as to their costs, we can maybe modify this line, but it's a placeholder for now. We've taken into account all of our lines that would be for supplies that would be vulnerable to inflationary pressure. Could be tires for our vehicles. We're seeing those are much higher. Supplies, be it paper, be it salt, be it tools, everything across the board. We've identified the budget for supplies in the village is about $2 million. So taking about a 5% inflation factor, we right now have a cushion in there of 100 for inflationary pressures. Our debt service line, now those costs are increases. We have two significant decreases that has really accounted to offset the increases that gives us a potential, lower tax levy. And one is debt service. Why debt service is less is the debt schedule provides for a payoff over time. And this year, or in the past year, we retired about 60,000 of debt. So our debt service schedule is about 60,000 less than it was last year because items are being paid off. On top of that, at the end of each fiscal year, when we close projects, sometimes they have a surplus or an amount of money that has not been spent for the project. And it can be sizable over time. And there are so many projects. Those get transferred to the debt service fund, and those are by law required to be used to pay off future debt service. So that's in our debt service fund, and there's about $1.2 million in that fund. Some of it will be paid out. Also, there's a portion of that that's due to a premium that was paid when we refinanced that gets paid off during the entire stretch of that serial bond. However, there's a portion of it that's just an accumulation of surpluses from different projects, and we need to pay it out. Right now, we're going to amortize it over a 5-year period. So that will be about a reoccurring offset of about $200,000 for the next 5 years. So of course, between the decrease in the debt service schedule and applying those surpluses from the debt service fund, we're able to decrease the general fund debt service line by $324,000. So we'll go on to the retirement contributions. Last year we had an increase because of the stock market decline in 2020. The retirement fiscal year for their measuring of their performance in the financial markets, as well as evaluating the costs for each municipality that participates in it, goes from April 1st to March 31st. And if you recall back in 2020, that was when the stock market decreased so much, really it was a collapse there for a while at the end of March, but those figures were calculated into the financials. So last year was a tremendous increase in our contribution rate, but now that it's a year later and a recovery of the stock market, they have lowered the rates dramatically. For our non-police, it's gone down by 27%. Police, not so much, a little slight decrease, about 5%. But the significant one goes from, for the non-police, it goes from a contribution rate of 18%. What that actually means is we pay 18% of all salaries of those people that are in the retirement system. 18% of salaries gets contributed to the retirement system. The contribution rate for police is actually 20%.
Brenda, isn't
I'm sorry, it's
isn't it
30%.
closer to 30?
It's 30%. Thank you, Larry. I said, that doesn't sound right. Let me check that. Yeah, it's 30%.
It's dramatically higher, right?
Yeah, dramatically high. It's 30% and was reduced to 29. The non-police is 18 and it went down to 13. So the large impact is really in the non-police contribution rate. When that's taken into account for the general fund, it's an over $200,000 decrease in the contributions. So very significant. This is lower than it even was prior to the pandemic. We haven't seen these rates since going back. I can take a look. I have it here, probably 2013, 14. Next, we have the library. The library has its own budget, but we do the tax levy through the general fund. And why it's lower is we actually budget the exact number of medical plans or health insurance plans that they need for their employees. So there's been some change in personnel, so that attributed to part of this decrease, and also the the retirement. So the decrease in the retirement also affects the library, that's non-police. So those two together, right now, at this point in time, it's a decrease in the amount we need to levy to balance the library budget. All right, I worked with our chief of police, Chief Pignatelli, this past week in preparation for when he does his departmental presentation. So I have actually those items in here. There was $41,000 in requests at this point. So I'm adding that in here because I have it. We also have here, I've added back in the DPW recurring paving that we really wanted to get in last year, but decided the last minute that we couldn't do it in the adopted budget, and later funded it with fund balance. But it's, I think right now might be a good opportunity to reintroduce that into the budget. So we have here, when you take that all into account, an increase in appropriations by $81,000. So we have our appropriations that get offset by revenues. Maybe thanks, Larry. Okay. We looked over the revenues. We can look at departmental revenue streams closer when those departments give presentations. But I think right now we can safely figure in an increase to the sales tax revenue. For the fourth quarter, they're up about 15% over last year. It was about a 13% increase for the third quarter of this past year. And what I'm using is for this projection, based on those increases, we'll be about $200,000 over budget, over the expectation for this year. So knowing that we will be over and have a surplus, even with the current level of spending, we can increase that budget line by 171,000, meaning consumer spending. So we're not factoring in an increase in consumer spending because we want to be conservative, but given the current rate of the economy, we're using those numbers for next year's budget. So it's a conservative approach, but I think it's realistic with the activity that we're seeing. Similarly, for mortgage tax revenue, we're increasing $50,000. We feel comfortable with that. It's bringing it up to a more realistic level that really has been sustained now for a while. We dropped it during pre-pandemic, not realizing the impact that it was having, or just what happened in the real estate market in general. Our interest income, sadly, we need to decrease. It's only at 25,000, but we need to bring it to 15. The interest rates we receive, even on a CD, are very low. The best I could do on CDs right now is a 0.25. I was able to secure one at 0.30. And given our surplus of about, 5 to 6 million, you're only yielding like 13,000 a year. You just can't drive the money any better than that. So just to be realistic and to see what's going on, it's a decrease there. So you have here some increases, one decrease in revenue, and then the impact of reducing our usage of surplus from last year's amount to the 175,000. So that acts as a decrease on the revenue side. So basically revenues would be down because surpluses are reflected on the revenue side of 31,000. So if you have your appropriations, that's how much you need to levy, plus the amount of the shortfall in the revenues that you need to levy, it brings the total levy increase to 112,833. And that number then gets put into the top sheet that we looked at. That corresponds actually with the top sheet that we were looking at. And it's an increase. Actually, you don't see it on the top sheet because it's an increase. The 15 million, that would be the 15 million from prior year, 15,087. And if you added then the 113,000 we're looking at from the other sheet. And that's how we come up with how much the levy would be in the general fund.
Any questions
So,
about anything
that's
here?
kind of,
Obviously, this is the kickoff of the budget, not the end of the budget. Just kind of framing where our starting point, so we know how much we have to whittle away typically. But this year it seems like we're in a decent spot to start.
We do have one other schedule to show, and that it's for the tax cap calculation. So it's
I'm guessing it's going to be in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not too exciting, but we can just show that real quick, and then
Sure.
any questions, hold on.
And I think too, for anyone listening, the process now is, this is kind of framed big picture, from the clerk's office, the treasurer's office. And then we typically have just about every department come in and present their budget, talk about anything obviously new typically is the highlight. And we have those over the next several months. And we have to have a finalized presentation. Was it the end of March?
So the
yeah.
tentative budget is March 20th,
March 20th. Okay.
right? And then public hearings will take place during April.
4th. Yeah,
Yeah.
April 4th will be the budget hearing, and we would hope to adopt it by April 18th. That would be pretty much our last meeting that we would adopt the budget
And it has to be adopted by May 1st, is that
by
right?
May 1st.
So let me pull up the tax cap just to give you a quick.
Yeah. It might be an issue in the future, but for this year, we're sitting very, very in a great position. It starts off with the prior year tax levy. That's the 15,087,402. They give us a base tax growth rate. It's the amount of new construction. This number comes from the state. And it's based on, I guess, assessments or additions to the assessments that are based on new construction. So we have a growth base factor. On the far right, it just illustrates how much additional levy could be imposed and stay in compliance for each of those items. So just based on the growth factor, we could levy an additional 66,000. The pilots are payments in lieu of taxes. We have only one for $16,000. Then we have the allowable levy growth of 2%. I will note that the state controller has identified that the inflation rate for the same period was about 4.23%. So over 4%, but regardless, you only allowed the cap of 2%. So it's the lesser of the rate of inflation or the 2%. So the 2% is less than the 4%. So that's the max, the 2%. But that gives an opportunity to levy up to $303,396. I had them in color. That one is very difficult to see here, but the carry forward from last year is 232,575.
Because we levied under the tax cap last year by that much.
That's right. So there's a carry forward for an amount that's unused. You cannot carry the entire amount. You're able to carry 1.5% of the tax levy plus exclusions. So let's go down to the next number. So you have the exclusions, you have the the tax levy limit plus exclusions. Then what I put in here is last year's tax amount because we're not sure what it is. This is just showing you the potential of the entire tax levy increase that could be imposed and still remain compliant. So in theory, you could raise the taxes by over 600,000, the levy by 600,000 and still remain compliant.
And the budget that we just talked about would raise it by that 100 and what was the number?
13.
112. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yep. So those are the numbers that we're comparing, this 112 versus the limit, which is 602. So we're obviously well within the tax cap, as the mayor foreshadowed.
The interesting thing is obviously it's 2%. And if inflation continues for a year or two at 6%, it's going to be interesting to see how those two things collide. But
now again, I would anticipate we'll have a carryover again, and you can see the calculation. It's 1.5% of the 506 was in last year. So it would be 1.5. It would be a similar number. It would be 1.5% of the 15,687. Be 1.5. So it'd be a very similar amount as to last year that we could carry over again for next year. So if we don't use the entire 600,000, we will still be carrying over probably the 230,000. Something in that neighborhood. It's been going on a while, tax cap. I don't know how many years, 8-9 years maybe.
Yeah, and we've been compliant with the tax cap every year and generally had carry forward.
My one comment would be that I'm pleased to see that we're going back to the pre-pandemic use of fund surplus, at least right now. And it certainly doesn't look like we're going to have to use more than that to keep our tax rate down, given that we're looking at a negative increase to start. So I think that's good. I mean, we always said it was good to have that money for a rainy day. That rainy day hopefully has come and gone. And I like the idea of going back to the 175.
Yeah, we thought that made sense. And, any of this that's being presented here is not, obviously none of it's written in stone. This is coming from staff being presented to you on a high level. But decisions like, how much to appropriate or how much not to appropriate, all of those things are yet to be made. We just did what we thought made sense as a starting point, just to give you a picture of an overview, as was the goal of tonight.
Great. Well, again, I think for Mitchell and Arlene, I remember my first year I sat down, I think it was with Brenda, maybe Brenda and Larry, and just kind of went over the big book, the kind of the big budget book, which I think we got the online version of today. So it might make sense to do that. Maybe not now, but maybe after some of the presentations. And I think maybe too, you can go over with Brenda some of the transfers that happened that are just really bookkeeping that didn't make any sense to me either. Even as an accountant, they didn't really make sense to me until they kind of walked me through it, and then they made sense. But ask a lot of questions, I think is my advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, Arlene and I met with Larry and Brenda. Oh, sorry, Arlene, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, Arlene and I met with Larry and Brenda. Was it last week? I'm losing track of time now. I think it was last week, and we got a lot of great information from them, asked a lot of questions, really kind of bent their ears. So they had 4 bent ears by the time this was all over. And really thank you to both of them for answering so many questions that we had. And so that today's presentation made total sense because we had talked about all these
That's
things.
great. I was wondering why there weren't any
Say
questions.
the same thing, yeah. Yeah. No, it obviously really helped a lot. So good job explaining both Brenda and Larry.
And Brenda, every year I find this this overview super helpful because it kind of sets the tone as to how active we have to be looking for cuts or that sort of thing. So
Well,
thank you.
we were really fortunate on those 2 items of the debt service and the retirement system. The impact is really felt this year. Next year, even if we, allocate the 200,000 that we have from the debt service surplus, I think the impact is only really felt the first year. So we're in a fortunate position. I don't know next year, but for this year, we're sitting in a great position.
But to Larry Lonke's point, we are backing off on the amount that we're using from our surplus to reduce the budget. So we're going back down to the 175 level as we talked about. So that gives you renewed flexibility for next year or the year after, should you have any issues.
No, and I think too, still using 175, at this point anyway, it makes sense because we still have a very healthy surplus, which, you only want to have so much surplus. You don't want to just continue to build that forever. So.
Right.
Well, thanks, Brenda. Thanks to your
You're welcome.
staff. Thanks, Larry. Super helpful every year.
Yeah, thank you, Brenda. It was great.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay.
So if there aren't any other questions, I will move on to reports of boards, standing committees, and officers with the trustee liaison reports, and we'll start with Mark Gilland.
I don't really have anything at this moment to add to the meeting. Thank you.
I'm actually anxious to get back into live meetings just so we have an order. So I'm just going on the old-fashioned order of Mark, then Larry. So Larry?
Well, I think Joe gave a pretty good outline of what's been going on with rec. The only thing I will add is from Chief Billings, the Irvington Fire Department training for the month of February 1st, their annual health physicals. February 15th is May Day and firefighter survival. And one last comment, ex-Lieutenant Joseph Slavin passed away, and the fire department mourns and keeps his family in our thoughts and prayers.
Arlene?
So I got to meet with Greg Nielsen and Jim Englishby and was amazed at what they do, quite honestly. And so, if people know, there's been lots of snow and water main breaks, and those departments have been doing a really good job. So I just want to say it was really good to spend time with them and get to know what those departments do. I also met with Chief Pignatelli, and since Chief gave his report last week, but so if people are interested in, sort of getting an update where the police committee recommendations are, they should definitely, there's the last meeting, he went into that in detail, but also he just wanted me to highlight that, from those recommendations was clarifying on the website where you can put complaints, give them compliments, and very importantly, an easy way if people want to do FOIL requests, so that the police website is pretty, transparent. And I think people don't quite know that piece of it yet. So he just wanted me to highlight that. And that's it. The Green Policy Task Force is working on comments for the priorities. So that's it. My update.
Great. And Mitch?
Okay, nothing from the school board that I received. I spoke with Melinda Chapelier of the Farmers Market Committee, and she brought me up to speed onto what's going on. She said she doesn't usually do regular announcements. She'll let me know if there's something that everyone has to hear. At some point, I think I'm going to chat with Larry about a couple of questions that she had, but nothing major. They seem to have things under control. Things seem to be going really well there. The theater has a meeting coming up. I should have some information at that meeting, which I plan on attending at least part of. And the one group that had some announcements they wanted me to make was the library. They have some upcoming events they wanted everyone to know about. They are having a in-person show and meeting with the photographer Pam Grafstein, and that's this Saturday. Information on all of these things, including Zoom addresses for online stuff, is on the library website. So go there to check any of this out. There's also an evening with the Irvington Shakespeare Company. And she wanted everyone to know that this has been rescheduled. It was originally scheduled for January 12th, but it's now scheduled for January 27th, and that's an online event. There's a class on memoir writing with Catherine Wald. That's an online event of February 4th. There's an online chocolate and Lady Godiva with Tony McKeon. You would think that would have to be in person to get the chocolate, but that's just the name of the story. Yeah, so that's an online event on February 5th. And then there's an online and in-person YA program, YA Valentine boxes. That's Thursday, February 10th. Registration's required, and it's open now, so you can go to the website to do that. And finally, how to start writing your novel. Class 2 of 3 is Thursday, February 10th as well. And you can register online for that as well. And that's my liaison reports.
Great. Well, thank you all. Next up is the village administrator's report.
So tomorrow, Brian and I will be meeting with a representative from the New York State Controller's Office, which normally is not a great thing because it all usually means we're getting an audit, but it does sound like it's an introductory meeting. I guess the person is fairly new in their position and they want to meet some village officials and around the county. So hopefully that's what that is. And there's also a restart of the Climate Smart Communities Task Force. I met with the chairperson, Judy Frimmer. It looks like we'll be having a meeting next week sometime of the volunteers who are still available to get working and see what's ahead of us for silver certification. So actually, Mark doesn't know it yet, but he'll be getting an invitation to that as well, just to keep you in the loop on it if you're interested in attending. that's it. I think it's probably next Thursday, I believe. But anyway, you'll get details from me on that. So we'll get that going. That's it.
Great. Brenda, do you have anything else tonight?
Nothing further.
And Mary Ann?
Fortunately, no legal stuff, but just to follow up, because somebody had raised the question of the Marvera subdivision, the one on Castle Road, and just to let you know that the planning board really did an exhaustive study of it, and then finally at their last meeting, they did approve the subdivision into 3 lots. But one of the conditions of the subdivision approval was to require a conservation buffer of I think about 40 feet deep around the whole property, and then besides this conservation buffer, to reduce the area on this site that houses could be built from what the zoning code restrictions would be, so that they'll be pushed back some from the lake. So it's a plan I think pretty much everybody was satisfied with, but just to let you know, because it did come up. I think the public raised it a couple of meetings ago. So that's it.
Great. So now we'll open it up to public comment. Yeah, I didn't really have too many action items, Larry.
You know what? I just remembered something. I'm sorry to be so late off the whatever. I don't know what the metaphor is. Larry, I just wanted to remind you that at the last ARB meeting, and I've seen emails from Rick, that there's still, I think they're still questioning about if they can get back to a 2 times a month meeting schedule. I don't know if that was resolved, but the last email I saw, it didn't look like it had been resolved yet. And
No,
so,
that's not resolved yet. So I'll put that on my list. It was already on my list, but I'll make sure that we follow up on that. It's going to take a fair bit of discussion on that, just to
yeah,
make sure
I
we
just
can
want to
handle
say
that.
that they really, their meetings have been, it's hard to believe it, but longer than the planning board meetings. The last
Right.
few meetings, it's been quite extensive.
Understood. Okay.
All right. No one raised their hand. There are no action items. I will make a motion to adjourn. If I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
And
Thanks,
bye.
everyone.
Thanks
Good night,
again,
everyone.
Brenda,
Warm.
for your
Bye-bye.
overview.
Barry, be well.
Thanks. Good night.
Yeah, Larry, be well.